People who quit their job in the heat of the moment. What crap show did you leave them to handle? Didn't get a bonus because they felt the overtime. I did paid me more than the bonus they gave to everyone else. I didn't know what to say to that, so after a few hours, I offered to get coffee for everyone. Then I left and never came back or contacted them again. I keep thinking that I should go back with coffee now. I've been gone 10 years and just act normal. Story 2, shoppers ducking drug mart. I had simply asked for better hours after working ridiculous late-night hours for over a year. Instead, they hired a new guy and gave him the exact hours I asked for and then had me train him. So when training wasn't going very well because new guy was super slow, they blamed me for it. Now I had a good standing with everyone at the store, but I didn't need shoppers, and I let a lot of crap slide every day. So again, when I asked for a vacation that I deserved because I was never sick and punctual as all hell, I was denied it, and the next day the manager had 4 weeks of vacation set. So to make it up to me, they offered me all these insane overtime shifts for the next 3 weeks. So I waited for the frozen deliveries to arrive that same day. The boss was packing up to go home, and when he said goodnight to me, I said, "But who is going to do this frozen delivery?" He laughed and said, "You are." So I replied, "Nope," and he became super cross, so I started laughing. "What are you laughing about?" he says. So I said, "Duck yourself. I quit." Now there was no one to finish the night shift. He immediately asked for the uniform. "Nah," I said, "duck yourself. I quit." I had never done that before or since. Uniform went in the trash. Story 3. I worked as a small engine repair tech for a larger company. I'm also in the National Guard. I'd gotten hurt and needed physical therapy, and 1 or 2 days a month I would have to miss because of an extended drill weekend. Well, my boss didn't like that, and she decided that she would punish me by making me stay later than everyone else. She was punishing me for going to physical therapy for a workplace injury and for being a soldier. Now you may be thinking, having to stay late to keep up on your work doesn't sound like that much of a punishment. Normally, you would be right, but trust me, she was doing a lot more to make sure it was a punishment. Well, one day after being told that I was not given approval for the 1 day of vacation, I asked for 3 months in advance to go see the eclipse, and generally being treated like a slave, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And clocked out at the end of my shift. That next Monday after drill weekend, I showed up, packed up all my tools, and took off. My boss started freaking out when she saw what I was doing. I left and found out that me leaving cost her over $100K because she had to ship my workload to another state to get another shop to work on them. That meant she needed to pay to ship them and then pay to ship them back. And since her shop didn't do any of the actual work, she never saw any money for any of the repairs. It was over 80 riding mowers. Story 4, 18 years old. Assistant manager at a big pizza franchise. Had been working open to close for 2 weeks straight because the new GM went on vacation right after taking over the store. When she got back from her vacation, she worked a half day, I opened and still closed. Then she changed the schedule and took 2 days off. This was the last straw on top of a ton of other crap piled over a year. Multiple new GMs, crafty district manager, awful store politics. I was alone during an unusually large lunch rush and was just done with everyone's crap. I had a make line full of orders, phones ringing, oven full of pizza, orders to be picked up, and a massive batch of dough sitting on the prep table. I said, "Duck it." I shut the oven off, walked out, and locked the store. Didn't call anyone to let them know. It would be hours before the evening driver would roll in. No prep for the day, no dough for the day, except for the blob I'm sure would become a massive mess after rising for hours. A double-deck oven with both belts full of pies wasted and what was probably shaping to be a $1,200 lunch out the window. I hope she was well rested after her time off. Story 5. I got hit in the shoulder while working as a bookmaker, betting shop manager. I was the only key holder. And while the paramedics were tending to me, the area manager was on the phone asking me to open the store the next day. I closed shop for the day, came back once I got out of hospital, put my keys in the safe, and left my notice on the desk. Store didn't open for 3 days while they sorted a field manager. Story 6. Worked as the engineer at the mill, was responsible for operation and process adjustment of certain pieces of equipment. Made it works with better than specified results. But my managers required more production, less power, etc. So, at the point machine reached its capacity and further pushing was risky and huge amount of invest was needed, I was told by brass that you didn't even try to do it. Only say some lame excuses. I was full of this crap and called to the manufacturer of this equipment. Long story short, instead of instructions and advices, they sent me a job offer for local service rep. After I quit the mill, my ex-colleagues tried to push machine above the limits and successfully broke it and stopped the production for a couple of weeks. Story 7. Oh boy. Let me tell you of my last day of Walmart. It's Monday morning, my day off, and I was pulling out of MD Anderson after getting blood work done when I receive a call from my manager. Let's call her Douche Canoe. Douche Canoe asks me to come into work because of 2 call-offs. Thinking that I did not have anything else planned and could use the overtime, I agreed. I informed her over the phone it would take me an hour to get home, dress, and drive to work. All I heard was an annoyed, "Fine, just get here." 1 hour later, I arrived at work. Just as I was getting to the deli, where I work, my manager, who was behind the counter by herself, starts yelling at me for being late. In front of not one, not two, but a line of customers, I attempt to remind her of our conversation, but she cuts me off, tosses me her apron, and storms out of the deli. I am forced to shrug it off, apologize to the customers, and get to work. Later, I have a customer walk to the deli and ask about our rotisserie chicken, something not uncommon. I explain it will be over an hour before they are ready and suggest driving 5 minutes north to the other Walmart. He nods, thanks me, and walks away towards the front. I thought nothing of it and continued to cook popcorn chicken. 5 minutes later, the same customer comes back with none other than Douche Canoe, who is asking me about the rotisserie chicken. I, once again, attempt to explain how long the chicken has left to cook and the suggestion I made. No sooner than when I finish speaking, she berates me for being lazy and telling a customer to go elsewhere. I ask what else is there I could do, as I couldn't make the oven cook faster. Her next words stick to this day. "I want you to do your damn job, or you can kiss it goodbye." A moment of pause from everyone. Zoe and May have been listening in the entire time, as well as the customers they were helping. I ponder, then smile. Okay, I apologize to Zoe and May, wish them the best of luck, and walk out of the deli towards my manager. I stop in front of her, take off my apron, kiss it, say goodbye, and walk out of the store. I still have my name badge and hat to this day. Story 8. I worked for 25 years for a large company in the sales division. I was making 6 figures and had earned my role as VP of the West Coast. My plan was to stick around to retirement, but then we got a new president. And the new president was an a-hole to everyone. I saw one sales guy walk up all excited and offer a handshake to meet him. The president didn't shake the extended hand and instead said, "I can't believe you came here without polishing your shoes." The president gave a directive for me to stop hiring people with business or sales experience and to start just hiring attractive men and women because their good looks will sell products better than the educated words of a veteran salesperson. Plus, they are young and work cheaper. I went along with this request and made 2 such hires. Then the next request came along. "Tell me who is the worst member of your team right now." I explained my team was number 1 in the company and we're all doing well. But the weakest one, 8-year employee who had a bad year last year. He was making less frequent calls and the quality of calls was dropping. I had to place him on a PIP to improve in 3 months. And he did. He busted ass, worked long hours and weekends, and moved into the number 1 spot on my team. At the end of the 3 months, the president calls me to discuss the PIP. I explained the great progress and that I want to release him from the PIP because he is on track now. The reply was, "Well, there's probably other things wrong with him anyway, so terminate him and document it. Make sure to hire a young, attractive person as a replacement." I quit on the spot with 0 days' notice, unusual for a white-collar job, and told him to do his own dirty work. Now I work as a high school teacher. Story 9. I've only done this once in my life, but it was a really crazy situation. My first professional job was an event planner for a small business, like 3 people. I was 24 and I worked there for a year. After about 5 months, my boss became extremely abusive. She would make little snide remarks about my terrible skills or time management or organizing. She stopped talking to me and would basically act like I wasn't there unless it was to criticize me for something. One day she asked me if I implemented a new filing system she had learned from the bank she used to work at. I replied no, as she hadn't yet showed me how to do so. She said with a stack of papers in her hand, "Well, I guess giving you these would be ducking useless then." Another example is that she would find little ways in which I was being pert or snide in some way, usually something completely BS, and would make me sign forms saying we had meetings about my behavior and listed all the things we would do to change it and help me grow. Like I worked for a big incorporation or something with an HR department and not a private office with literally 1 boss. If I argued why I wasn't doing so, she made me sign something saying I was refusing training. I literally have no idea who those papers were for. Stuff like that. It made me so paranoid and unhappy I spent many lunches crying in my car and many nights stressed out completely after work. I couldn't understand what had changed and felt so stupid and helpless. My coworker had just left, so it was just the 2 of us, and I gave my 2 weeks because the thought of being alone in an office with her was unbearable. As soon as I left her office, she called her mom to complain about me ditching her and talked about how happy she would be with me gone, while I was about 10 feet away in another room with the doors open. I lost it, got up from my desk and grabbed my purse, went to her office and told her that I was leaving for good, right this minute. I was shaking and terrified, and she was furious. She told me, "Good luck finding another job in this town. I know everybody." Spoiler alert, I did. The kicker, what I didn't know at the time, was that my coworker had been feeding her BS the whole time. When it started to affect how I was being treated and I would complain or talk about it, guess who also told my boss all of that? Yep, with many embellishments, of course. I had zero experience with people like that and overlooked many clues, like how she would stay after work a lot to finish her assignments, while in reality she was staying to tattle on me, because I was so new to the real world and naive. I found out all of this a few months later from one of her friends I ran into, who she had also screwed over in some way. It made me stronger, and after I left, my boss had to deal with scrambling to find people to do all her events, and I'm sure it was hell. I felt happy about that at first, but now that I'm 10 years older, I can see things differently. She definitely could have handled it better, but it was her first boss, job too, and she maybe had some things to learn herself. Story 10. I was the food guy that worked for some crafty farmer's market. I am a trained chef, and since then started my own catering company. It was, for all intents and purposes, a temporary job until I found something better. However, there was some potential there, so I made a deal with the owner of the market for me to set up a spot and sell food to bring people in. It took off and people came in swarms, but the guy never paid me commission anyway. The owner paid me crap and promised to pay me commission for my food sold, and he was a huge a-hole. He bullied the employees. One day he hired a new manager, this dumb Karen, who worked for some hot dog place, who was on my ass for things that made no sense. She had a huge chip on her shoulder. She quit after a week, but that doesn't matter. What matters is she had told me to clean something that I said I would clean in the morning. At this point, I worked 2 jobs and was working 16-hour days, which really is about average now. And the owner sent me a message saying I was disobedient, I didn't leave early and the power went out, so I stayed to help the people on shift. But he demanded an explanation. So I responded with the following message. I'm going to be addressing a few points in this message that will answer your question and more, but don't bother calling me or contacting me, because by this point, I would have already blocked your number. Yesterday, during the 4 hours I was in the farmer's market, I was helping the girls salvage all of the food that would go bad from the lack of temperature, and helping them identify what foods needed saving and what foods can stand temperature. I was helping them with the Cisco order that came in late, so I couldn't leave early because one of them was on break. I was helping deal with leaks, make smoothies, and that everything was running smoothly. It was slow, but there was much to handle due to the lack of power. You really expect me to just drop them and potentially endanger the health of other people to clean a fridge that was already filthy dirty when I started doing this setup for you? That market is already suffering health violations all over the place. But I won't name them for you because you seem so keen on focusing in on one thing that I was actually going to clean on Friday when I was focused more on myself and my work, and not with the failing power system of a makeshift barn. FYI, the market was inside of a barn. Yes, a barn. Addressing Donna, I have no idea where you found her. She thinks she can get off telling people what to do and she herself doesn't fully understand how things work. Multiple times last weekend when I was juggling with different orders, working in that claustrophobic space and other employees walking through while I'm trying to cook, Donna felt it was a smart idea to talk to me and ask me questions and ask me how my samples were coming. I was very patient and cordial with her, but she was very demanding and quite obviously knows very little how to run the market. She can barely even use the sales system. She does, however, do an excellent job walking around the nursery and giving samples that can literally be done by anybody. But obviously she knows what she's doing, right? I'm sure if she asked me to piss on the potatoes and I didn't, it would be an issue. But if she walked around outside aimlessly giving samples and not actually learning how to be a manager, she would get congratulated. Amazing. And as for explanations, I want an explanation for why it's taken you 6 weeks to even consider giving me what you promised me. I want an explanation for those times you forgot, or just flat out didn't sit down to go over the sales reports and talk ideas and talk about that money promised. I genuinely cared about the market. So many ideas I was confident in seeing implemented. But quite frankly, it's not worth dealing with someone as difficult as you. Getting paid $10 an hour and being talked to in a demeaning manner while I'm busting my ass, bending over backwards for you, is not worth the $152. I would rather keep my dignity and bring my gifts somewhere else. Perhaps if you realized how you talk to people, you would understand why people quit and leave you. I don't really want to do this for the sake of leaving the people I made connections with and for seeing this vision come to life, but dealing with all of this is just not worth the time. I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors and hope you find it in you to see it from the employee's point of view in the future before making condemnable assumptions about them. Have a nice life. I could have called the FDA on him because of how the state of some things were and how he lied about there being organic vegetables that were bought from the same place Publix gets them. I later learned that he's tried to steal my recipes from the other employees. They didn't know it, and anything they did happen to know, they refused. And he hired 2 people to take my place. They couldn't keep up with what I was doing. IDK how that place is doing now. Story 11. Worked for a landscape company doing new installs. Our owner was cheap with a bad habit of constantly biting off more than he could chew. One year, he asked if we wanted any part of a school project in a city we didn't live in, over 2 hours away, and we said no. He said that was fine and would just bid on one school for his crew who lived in that area. Instead, He bid on multiple schools and got 3 of them. Obviously, none of us are happy about this, and he claimed that he'd put us up in hotels so we wouldn't have to commute. He never did. The work itself sucked, way more than a crew our size could handle, and the owner's brother did absolutely nothing. He was supposed to be the project manager's supervisor, and literally all he did was play Clash of Clans on his phone and yell about people not being fast enough. After a few days, I was done. I'd grown sick of the job anyway, but this project really sealed it. Having to commute 4+ hours a day and then physically destroy myself was taking a toll fast. I woke up Friday morning, called the owner, told him I quit and to stop taking more work than he can manage. He blew up, but I just hung up the phone and went back to sleep. 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. He's begging me to come back because after I quit, 2 other guys did too. The project is now woefully behind schedule and he's going to get fined if things don't pick up and get finished. I told him he should have thought of that before he bit off more than he could chew and expected a small crew to do it all in a short time frame. He got quiet and then asked if a 50-cent raise would get me back. No. Last time I ever heard from him, and I can't find his company website anymore. Story 12. I haven't quit yet, but I've carefully been planning my exit for a few months now. Here's a list of reasons why. After a successful internship, I was offered a contract, only there's a twist. It's less of a work contract and more of contract buying a service. Essentially, I'm a freelancer working full-time for them without any of the rights of a worker, which is obviously illegal. I was and am paid crap. After taxes and rent and all that crap storm, I'm left with 200 euro to pay bills, food, and everything I need to survive. My work is greatly appreciated, but never repaid. I'll often get compliments on my work while being treated as an absolute slave. For years, I put my work above all else. The overtime I built up is enough to put me in vacation until my contract ends in July. These hours were obviously never paid or even acknowledged. Due to my willingness to work, I was overrun with crafty jobs my colleagues or bosses didn't want to do. My professional advice, the main reason I was even hired, was ignored many times in favor of advice from friends and to satisfy ulterior motives. When people like me got fed up and unionized, I was implicitly threatened that joining such movement and complaining would have bad results for me. These warnings came directly from my boss and his boss. Had rumor and slander spread about me from a particularly unbalanced coworker. Said coworker would humiliate me many times in front of other colleagues and supervisors, some of which would encourage her. The rest would make the minimal effort to chastise her. When I eventually snapped after being accused by this coworker of essentially not doing her job, which for some reason she assumed was my responsibility, I was treated as an animal who needed training by my boss and her superiors. Said coworker was eventually moved away from my room, not because of her unprofessional demeanor, but because I was apparently a source of stress to her. Had to endure homophobic retorts aimed at me, but curiously, never voiced in front of me. Sad to say, many other coworkers and supervisors seem to be delighted in antagonizing me, even though I'm in good standing with most people in that company, including some important players. These people will often act condescending or downright insulting, going as far as commenting my use of sneakers during a meeting in which 5 of the participants were very visibly playing games on their smartphones. The higher-ups bought a badly programmed and honestly useless piece of software for a ludicrous amount of money, potentially from one of their side business or to satisfy a friend. When they realized the software was useless, I was promoted to be its manager. Nothing changed except I'm berated if something doesn't work, which it never did. 3 months before taking vacations, I let my boss know and bought a plane ticket to visit my boyfriend. A month before said vacation, my boss informs me I couldn't go. If I did, I wouldn't be paid for it. I called her bluff, told her I'd go anyway because everything was set up. I did go, and I still got paid. Me and a group of coworkers got a fire extinguisher shot in our direction by an higher-up playing a prank. Our written complaint got ignored and mocked by HR. And recently I was informed that if I want to renovate my contract, I might have to do something that is potentially illegal and that I'm not comfortable enough with discussing online, let alone do it. What these people don't know is that I've always dreamed of immigrating and starting anew in either Canada or Norway. 2 months ago, I got a visa to work in Canada, and am currently looking for a job in either Halifax or Toronto. They also don't know I've been studying for almost a year now to become a web developer, which is finally paying off, and in a year, I might be skilled enough to land my dream job. I plan on quitting in about a month or 2. I'm waiting for the perfect timing because A, my company is about to buy add-ons to the aforementioned piece of crapware I was charged with. Only me and my boss managed to somehow operate it. Without me, my boss is very likely to be unable to fix every troubleshoot and question headed her way. B, a massive influx of work is about to come in. This is the result of a very expensive project the higher-ups have just bought. C, I'm quitting around the time the girl working with me has planned to end her internship. She has already worded her desire to not continue past her contract. This will reduce a sufficiently efficient team of 4 people to 2. My boss and a nice elderly lady who is very soon retiring. D. I want to sit in a room with my boss and his boss present and enumerate the reasons why I'm leaving and why it's inevitable. Phew, story 13. I worked in a DIY garden store called Dome Case. Yeah, Dome Case is what it sounds like. The green, white, orange store in the UK. I was the customer service supervisor and acting front-end manager until the replacement finished training at another store and transferred. This wouldn't be for another month. There are 4 tills in operation at the end of the day, and it's surprisingly busy for near closing. It is the beginning of summer though, so I put it down to people getting back into the garden again. Normally at this time of night, only one customer service staff is in, as they are the ones closing the store with one of the managers. This includes making sure returned items that are not damaged go back out on the shelves. Broken, damaged items are written off and stored correctly in the warehouse and for safe disposal, cashing up all 11 tills in the store, blocking off the garden center portion 10 minutes before final closing. There was paperwork that had to be filled out for the closing of the store in regards to cashing up. I was filling out the information as best I could whilst also helping the regular till guys who were rushed off their feet. As a supervisor, when it came to age-related products like knives, etc., I would have to code a secondary authorization on their till screens to show that the sale was okay. With all the garden equipment going through, this was every second sale over 4 tills, including my own at the service desk. It was hell. When the garden center manager came over, an ex-Army Super Karen who everyone hated, and started yelling at me for not having all the paperwork finished yet, I did my best to explain the situation. As customer service, I wasn't even supposed to be doing that paperwork anyway. That was manager work I only had the barest understanding of. She screamed like a lunatic at me. The till guys and most of the customers stopped to look over at her, but none of them said anything or tried to help. I had been frantically trying to do 4 jobs at once: customer service, supervisor, till, operator, front-end manager, and instead of helping she should have, she just let loose. I'm doing my best to continue working as quickly as possible, trying not to cry in front of her because that would mean I was weak and therefore due for more screaming at. After about 5 minutes of this, another manager comes over to see what's going on. He's still one of the most amazing bosses I've ever had. He tore into her about her treatment of not just me, though I seem to have gotten it worse since I started just a year before, but the entire staff unless they were a fellow manager. He basically told her that if she couldn't control herself, she'd be suspended, and the person most likely to get her job would be me, since in the last month, I'd been doing a fantastic job of acting manager. That shut her up for the night. And with good old Norman, ducking legend, we managed to close up everything just fine. The following morning, I was opening the store with Norman. He asked if I was okay because he knew I was having the hardest time with that woman. He even said that he was trying to get me the manager's pay for the time I had been filling that role, and it was looking good for me, particularly since the other managers all liked me and thought I did good work. As I was 19 at the time, I was pretty proud of myself. He even hinted that I could be up for a manager's position over in kitchens and bathrooms, but that it would be a couple of months before there was any movement there. Then Super shows up, late might I add, and is clearly still butthurt from the night before. When Norman heads off to file the paperwork for opening the store, she comes over and corners me in the little storeroom office behind the service desk. She said all sorts of horrific things to me. How I wasn't fit to be a manager, how I was scum, that I must be duck all the male managers to make them like me so much, because there was no other reason for them to. It was getting quite scary, and I started crying. She laughed at me, right in my face, and moved to get even closer to me. Terrified of what she might do, I ran for it. I smashed right into Norman, and when he asked what was going on, I straight up told him I quit. I couldn't stand being around such a terrible person anymore. He tried to convince me to stay because I was their only customer service supervisor person in until the following week since the other girl was on holiday, and the only one able to fill in for the manager role. I refused. As long as she was going to be working there, I could not. I was in my coat and out the door within a minute. She was fired a few days after that and nearly arrested for her tantrum. The store was seriously ducked for the next month until the new manager came in. Common decency and a civil attitude. We didn't have to like each other. She just had to not be an a-hole. Too bad. Story 14. Oh, I just did this last Friday following a really bad day at work. The straw that broke the camel's back. We had just hired a new girl, and I had been off for my 2 days and came back to be told I would be training her. Now, I'd only been there 8 months, and while I was comfortable and confident, there were times I was still awkward and made mistakes. Plus, I found out I was training her about 2 minutes before I was supposed to start, and we were in the middle of a duck ton of prep work on a very busy day, so it sort of sent me into a mild discomfort. However, I soldiered through it and tried to do my best with my trainee. I was engaging, told her every step of what I was doing, gave her praise when I thought she deserved it, let her go with me on patient visits, that sort of thing, showed her the different route around the building, told her about shortcuts, and showed her the really nice bathrooms if she needed a private place to pee. She was really quiet and uncomfortable, so I stopped and explained to her that I have mild autism and I don't read people well, so I overcompensate by talking. I told her if my rambling made her uncomfortable, that it wouldn't hurt my feelings if she asked me to stop. Sometimes my brain just gets stuck and I need someone to throw a wrench in there and stop the gears. She seemed pleased and relieved and, said that she was just nervous, but my talking didn't bother her. She was glad someone was being as thorough because her last 2 days had been rough, as they had given her trainers who were really lazy. We had a lady retiring who wanted to leave early on her last day, so one of our other workers came in a couple hours early to cover for her. She and I were working on a prep list, and she asked me if I thought she'd be able to get a 15-minute break since she'd have more than 5 hours, but less than 6 on shift. Jokingly, I told her not to get caught and forgot about it. A little while later, I have something to take up to a patient, so I ask the new girl if she wants to come. She stops and says, "I need to go talk to supervisor about something. Go without me." I just knew without confirmation that she was going to talk about me, though I didn't know why. Later on, my supervisor came out and made all sorts of baseless accusations against me. Told him to shut up when I tried to defend myself, called me a liar, and said we'd be having a meeting later on to discuss. Then she went and reported me to the departmental supervisor, who came out and called my professional integrity into question because of a ducking joke. I was further not allowed to defend myself. When I get mad enough, I have panic attacks, and I'm usually pretty good about not having them, but I couldn't stop that one from happening. Once I calmed down and one of my coworkers had told me to ignore them, that everyone else knew I was a good worker, I started thinking and came to the decision that I deserved better. I reviewed the last year and realized that my eager-to-please nature had allowed myself to be bullied and mistreated because I lacked the confidence to stand up for myself. I decided they didn't deserve me and that I was done. So I finished my work for the day, made sure the place looked really nice, wrote my resignation letter and left it with my badge on the counter and left. However, I left them desperately short-staffed. We had 2 people quit, 1 retired, and 1 got fired, all in the last 40 days. I went home, turned my phone off, and had my first decent night of sleep in a year. Woke to 6 hilarious messages from both my direct and departmental supervisor, begging me to reconsider, reminding me how little staff we have, how they understood I was probably really upset, that they handled it all wrong. If I would reconsider, they would make changes so everyone was happy, how I was justified in my reaction, but please, 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 come in and help. We really need you. The new girl can't do this, and this, but you can, and you're so good at your job. Please, just come in. You can even leave early if you want. You can have an extra break if you want, whatever you want. But we're sorry, please come in and save us. I never returned their calls, and they didn't stop calling me and leaving hilarious messages begging me to come back for about 5 days after I left. Too little, too late. As a group and individually, we went to our supervisors and begged for things to get better, aired our grievances, literally cried for help, for changes, and we were ignored. Our departmental supervisor thought baked goods would make us happy. Showed up in her yoga clothes with a dozen donuts and pastries on a busy Saturday. I've never been so mistreated by a place of business in my life. Story 15. I spent some time working at a gas station where my supervisor would take about 20 smoke breaks a day while demanding that the rest of us work harder. After several days of this, and my boss not doing anything about it, I quit in the middle of a pizza order rush. It is Casey's. For some reason, I was reluctant to give away the real name at the time of writing this. Story 16. I worked for a certain fast food company, represented by a large golden M, for 3 years. The first 6 months was for corporate, who were actually really great, and paid me a decent above minimum wage. Then I got transferred to a franchise closer to where I lived, and holy crap, it was the worst thing ever. The store closest to where I lived was right across from a high school of over 2,100 students, who made up almost 90% of the store's entire daily profit just with the lunch rush. You can probably guess from this that our store made the least profit of all the stores in this particular franchise, which made the owners treat us like absolute garbage. The customers were actually pretty nice most times. The only ones we usually had problems with were high school kids, and a good portion of everyone who came to our store was a familiar face due to being local. It was the management and the workers who really made that place hell. Every time we had a really good manager pop up, the owners would move them to a higher profit store. Every time a crafty manager acted up, they would be moved to our store, and no one ever got fired. About 6 months after being hired, I got promoted to crew trainer. I did my job well, never took shortcuts, and was happy to do extra things for managers to help them out. I took a lot of pride in my promotion since it was really my first job experience overall. Well, my first check rolls in after the promotion, which was supposed to come with a 20-cent raise, and my pay is exactly the same. Not gonna lie, I was angry, but management kept telling me that I would get it soon. I worked as a crew trainer for 2 years, 50 hours a week, and never saw a cent of that raise. I never even got a normal performance raise, despite glowing quarterly reviews. To make matters worse, our old GM got moved to a different store, and the new one was an actual joke. The man was 75 and had only worked in fast food 3 months before he was promoted. We had a good manager who had been waiting for the GM position for 7 years, and they passed her up for a joker that didn't know a mocha frappe got chocolate sauce on it. This new guy, who we all fondly called King Git, was impossible to work with. He was spineless and always got someone else to yell at you if he was displeased. I tried to talk to him about my raise a couple times, and he actually jumped over a goddamn table to get away from me once. Soon after that, my shifts started getting cut. Now I will mention something important. I was literally the only employee in the store who knew how close back cash and drive-through by that time, and it was the hardest job to do in the entire store. We were always left crazy understaffed, but one day King Git decided to cut our number of closers from 3 to 2. That meant a manager and a single coworker had to clean and stock lobby, close grill, count waste and inventory, close bank and close back cash all by themselves. And they were expected to be out within an hour. Now, one of the closing managers got tired of this bullcrap, and every night I was scheduled off, she called me in. She got reamed for it every time, but there was literally nothing else she could do if she wanted to be out by 4 a.m. That last stretch was the most physically and emotionally exhausting thing I ever experienced. After a full week of this, I was at the end of the rope. No one during day shift ever did their goddamn job. So when I had to close after a busy night, I had a whole hallway, floor to ceiling, of dishes to do by hand. The stupid day ducks kept breaking the dishwasher. I had worked 10 hours that day and hadn't had a break yet. There were only 2 of us in the entire store since 5 p.m. I thought I was going to lose my mind, and then help arrives. A grill closer appears, and we're saved. Until they tells us that they're only staying for breaks, and King Git said that if they close, they get fired. I went on my break, and I never came back. I heard later that the grill closer still left, so the manager just closed the damn store as is. When King Git came in the next morning, he fired the opening manager, the one who was supposed to get his job, for the mess. Almost immediately, all 5 managers, all opening staff, and 2 other trainers quit that same day. The store was closed for a week before the franchise went bankrupt and sold their stores. And legend has it, King Git finally got fired. Story 17. When I was a programmer at an insurance company, one of the longtime programmers had been with the company for nearly 20 years. This guy originally wrote most of the financial system himself, from scratch, and had maintained it with the help of a couple of other people. Every month, he did the month-end processing, and every quarter, he did the quarter-end processing. Every year-end? Yep, it was him. There was a change in management a couple of times, and he kept getting treated worse and worse. He was being treated unfairly, asked to do unreasonably more work than he was already doing, getting thrown under the bus, that kind of thing. He finally had enough, and one morning he came in, walked to the manager's office, and quit, then walked out the door. In the aftermath, it took a team of 4 other people, months and months, to get things back together and to a point where things were serviceable. Story 18. Gaming site I used to write for. This all happened in the span of 2 months. The new owner made us writers lose all credibility by writing unedited articles on his own and posting them freely. And they were the most widely ridiculous pieces I'd ever read. In one of them, he said, women only bought the Wii because they used the Wiimote as a sex toy. It made the rest of us look bad. He fired my friend simply because he didn't like him. He tried to claim my friend kept our review copy of Skyward Sword. There was more stuff that he did that I can't remember. My father died in December of that year. I informed everyone. I had also lost internet access for a while, because my provider was switching the way their routers and stuff connected. I had too much going on at the time to deal with that. When I connected to the McDonald's Wi-Fi one day, I read a ducking barrage of emails from the new owner, all amounting to, "Where the duck are you? And why aren't you writing anything?" I emailed him and CC'd everyone on the writing staff and told him he could go duck himself. 90% of the writing staff followed. 5 writers quit that day and people took notice. The site never recovered, and today it only exists as a landing page and hub for one podcast that just refuses to die. After that, the owner took to stalking the guy who hired most of his writing staff, online harassment, and most recently, he hacked the previous owner's email and stole his Destiny 2 review code. He's still out there being an idiot, but I only hear about it since I have him blocked on all social media. Story 19. I quit a few hours after my shift was over, but the next day was one of our most physically intense work days. For 6 months, my supervisors kept promising a raised promotion that never came. No matter how many more responsibilities I got or how well I worked, all I got were empty promises. It also didn't help that my mental physical health was starting to suffer. I sucked it up for a long time hoping that things would eventually get better, but they didn't. When I had enough, I sent in a text message to the group chat that all of the workers were a part of and said something like, "Don't expect me at work tomorrow or in the future, I quit." Once I sent in that message, a few coworkers tried reaching out to me, and one of my supervisors tried to get in touch. I assumed they were trying to get me to change my mind, but I was set on what I did, so I never spoke to any of my former supervisors, and it was a bit of a while before I fully opened up to my former coworkers. Besides having to deal with a physically intense shift the next day, I left them with a lot to handle. Even though I held the lowest position at that job, my supervisors knew that they could rely on me, so I had the work of 2-3 people. That was more suitable for an assistant manager. Since I was on good terms with one of my former coworkers, every now and then she'd let me know how things were. They ended up hiring 2 new guys to try and fill the hole I left, but they were never able to match what I was able to do. Prior to them being hired, my supervisors tried to spread out all of the work that I left behind. That resulted in the employees that worked there being overworked, and it all turned into a crap show. 3 months after I left, my former supervisors were still trying to get me to come back, but I didn't want to. Eventually, I found out that my head supervisor was lying about the promotion raise that I was promised. It was never on its way. It turned out he did the same to other workers at this job, and he turned most of the employees against him. When everyone found out what a piece of crap he was and how big of a problem he was, he decided to transfer out rather than be fired. It took a few months, but after I quit, a few other workers either left on good terms or had their contracts come to an end and chose not to come back. I like to believe that me quitting was the final straw that eventually led to all of the change that happened at this job. Story 20. Worked at a pseudo-fast food burrito place that rhymes with Chipotle for about a year and a half. Was doing well initially. Quickly learned restaurant standards for service and food quality, which, if I'm being fair, they took pretty seriously. Excelled at prep and grill. Didn't take long for me to train basically every new hire since turnover was astronomically high. Since I was the only one that could successfully run a full grill or prep shift from start to finish by myself with no assistance or hiccups. Typically, they'd have 2 running these stations, especially during peak hours, and was helping train so many people. Manager saw my potential and offered me a position as a kitchen manager. Before you can become a kitchen manager, however, you become a KMite or kitchen manager in training, which is essentially the company's way of making you act as a kitchen manager without the pay. So I managed people, trained people, scheduled people, placed truck orders for food, and stocked truck orders when delivered. By all intents and purposes, I was the kitchen manager without the official title or pay. Manager quits one day, just doesn't show up, and is never seen again. New general manager is some hotshot they hired from out of the company who is supposedly a culinary genius. He tells me, "You are not ready to be kitchen manager." I argue the fact that I've basically already been a kitchen manager this whole time without the title or pay. He says, "Nope, you don't have what it takes and you never will." So I said, "You're right, I never will." The plan next day, I find a job at another restaurant, making more money with better hours. Give me 2 weeks notice. Following day is a Saturday, arguably busiest day of the week, and I have the busiest shift, the opening shift. I'm running grill by myself as per the norm. No one else can run this position with 2 people, even half as well as I can by myself. I prep my normal stuff for the morning, get everything prepared. I take my paid lunch on the company's dime with the free burrito they give us for lunch every day. I come back to the line to prepare for open. Wait a few hours. Then the lunch rush starts. This could literally have not been a more perfect storm if I had wanted it to be. The line is literally out of the front door. Couple that with untrained line workers working too slowly and the ravenous, clucking sheeple. They're getting restless. Some customers are complaining about the wait audibly. I keep an eye on all the food, making sure I know how much is left of every meat and vegetable on the line I am responsible for. I keep making myself appear to be busy, laying down ludicrously smaller and smaller amounts of chicken and steak, purposefully letting the dwindling supplies dwindle even further. When we are almost completely out of chicken, steak, black beans, and fajitas, I decide now's the time. I shut the grill and the rice cooker off. I take my apron off and set it on the chef's table. I sigh a sigh of relief and smile. No one notices as I casually saunter through the kitchen and out the back door. I get in my car and begin driving home. 15 minutes into my 20-minute drive home, I get a call from the general manager that I answer gleefully. "Yes," I respond in a painfully happy tone. "Where the duck are you? Where did you go? Damn you." And I hung up. In hindsight, contrary to what a lot of people said after the fact on here, I don't regret it one bit. It was one of the single most satisfying moments of my adult life. That being said, I don't recommend always burning your bridges, kids. At least know which ones aren't worth burning and which ones you can afford to. If in doubt, just don't burn them. Story 21. I worked as a business analyst/project manager for a hardware support and warranty company. I worked there for about 6 years and knew the systems inside and out. When I got there, they were operating on an already antiquated data entry system. They acquired several large warranty contacts, Office Depot being one, and had to more than triple their call center staff. This was where the old software showed its age, and they were getting desperate for a solution. I got assigned the project of redesigning the software to be developed in-house. After 3 months, it became shockingly apparent that it was going to develop what they wanted with no regard for anyone, and management wanted what would have been a $300,000 piece of software on a budget of $15K. So even though I was the project manager, I got ignored by both sides and really was just a glorified technical writer and meeting organizer, so the two sides could bicker. Fortunately, because I originally started in the call center, I knew exactly what they needed, and I knew how to write the code for the basic framework. So in my spare time, I developed the basic framework and mocked up the GUI and started writing the paperwork. I showed this to one of the managers well above the bickering idiots, and he thought the idea was phenomenal. So we presented it to the owners, and they said they wanted to proceed with developing my solution once the current project was fully deployed to at least keep them functional. Now, about 90 days later, and before we switched to developing my proposal, they announced the company had been sold. They made a big deal out of reading about the new and exciting opportunities that awaited everyone, and that everyone who had been with the company for a long period of time would be getting bonuses. That happened on a Friday. The following Monday, I and my entire department got called into an HR meeting as we walked in the door. They fired the entire IT department, claiming it wasn't performing good enough on the spot. Because I was a bae, got lumped into them. The owners had split over the weekend. So because they fired us, they have zero severance. So it turned out that Friday's paycheck was our last real one. Needless to say, I was pissed. And I took all my documentation and software with me since I had developed it at home, not in the clock. About a week goes by and they contacted me asking where it all was, and I told them I had it. They then proceeded to threaten me for stealing company property, and I needed to bring it to them that day. I replied, I developed this off the clock and it belongs to me. I offered it conditional of my continued employment. Now, if you want to purchase this specially customized to this company piece of software, that will be $350 million, as anything comparable. It's going to start at $300K and need a minimum of 12 months of tuning. Needless to say, this infuriated them, and the idiot on the phone said, you can't keep it. The sale of this company was based around that software being available. I replied, well, that is something you are going to need to take up with the owners who skipped town after the sale and left us all hanging by our nuts as it wasn't their software to sell. A few weeks went by with them calling and offering various insulting amounts of money, the first being $3,000, which wouldn't have even been a decent severance that I also got ducked out of. Finally, I told them to get bent and not to call me with any offer under $250K. Their highest offer was $7,500. At that point in my life, spite was worth more than the money they were offering. Found out about a year later, they sued, or tried to sue, the previous owners who fled the country. They closed down that location 4 months later, despite having signed a contract that required them to keep that location open and all staff on board for their years. They used the at-will employment startee law to basically fire everyone for no reason or stupid reasons, and then had no contractual reason to keep the building once all their employees were gone. Ended up, they were not prepared in the slightest to handle the contracts we had, over of the 2 reasons they purchased us, and lost the contracts and got sued for millions for breach of contract. Story 22, famous footwear. During the interview, manager wouldn't shut up about how she wanted the other person, but would hire me just to give me a chance. Worked there for 5 shifts. On day 2, she went and asked my previous managers about my sex life. The one that really peeved me was she specifically asked my last employer who was employing my roommate, while my roommate was on shift, if I was sleeping with my roommate. On day 3, she got mad at me for doing something wrong after refusing to train me. I asked numerous times about pricing shoes. She would just do one silently without showing me where to look on the scanner or what exactly she was scanning or anything, and then hand it back as if she had retrained me. On day 4, she berated me, saying if I quit, it would royally duck her vacation up, which was the only reason she hired me over the other person. But now she wouldn't have time to train a new person to cover her vacation, which was still 2 months out. My roommate put in notice at her job on this day. On day 5, manager hears that roommate got a better job. She confronts me saying, I better not quit, and then asks if I planned on putting in 2 weeks. I told her I'd been considering because she refused to train me and she was asking inappropriate questions to my previous employers. She went off on me, yelling at me on the sales floor, telling me not to ever come back. She then put that she had terminated me in my paperwork due to insubordination and theft, as well as sending my one and only paycheck to the wrong address 5 times before I finally got HR to just cancel the old checks and mail it directly to me. My last day was on a Saturday. All except one of her staff quit by the following Tuesday, 3 days later. I accidentally brought one of the box knives home. I called asking if she wanted it back, and she threatened to call the cops if I ever showed up again. During the trying to get my check, I mentioned the questioning of my previous employers. They said they would deal with it. I moved out of town and never went back anyways, so not sure if she still works there. I did get my check, however, she lied about how much I would be making, so I was about $30 short because I was making $13 hourly instead of $14.50. Was so fed up with everything I said. Ducked that and just called it the amount I would willingly pay to have her out of my life forever. Story 23. I worked in shipping and receiving for a health food store. Over the past 5 days, everyone else had quit, including supervisors and department heads. I was working on a frozen shipment, my regular job. Dairy came in, cheese came in, a bit over $130K. Huge fancy cheese and whole wheels, a large, generally organic dairy shipment. I refused to sign any damn thing. GM demanded I sign and put it away. Signing was already out of my pay grade. Those numbers made it way the hell out of my pay grade. He then demanded that I put it all away. It would have taken the rest of my shift for my own work. I just quit. Damn it. Heard he signed it in, and it all went to waste. He was fired. Story 24. I worked for a pizza place for about 6 years. The original owner had passed away about a year and a half before I left. After the owner had passed, his wife took over the business. For context, the owner's wife wasn't much of a pizza cook herself, though she had worked in the shop consistently every Friday night for the previous 20 years. All she did, though, was put pizzas in and pull them out of the oven. She handled none of behind-the-scenes stuff. All that was handled by the owner, myself, and another manager. Immediately after the passing of the owner, the other manager and I both stepped up to the plate and took the reins. We told her we would handle all of the ordering and inventory as long as she would sign the checks. This is how it went for about 6 to 9 months, and everything ran smoothly as far as business went. We never skipped a beat. Then the owner's wife met someone new. This guy, let's call him Randy, came in and decided he was the new boss. She decided not to object to him. Randy wanted to change things. Randy felt that the business was not being run as efficiently as it could be. Although his idea of efficiency just resulted in him asking why a lot without being able to offer solutions himself. This is part of why I left, but not the entire reason, nor is it the straw that broke the camel's back. Like I said, I had worked for this place for about 6 years at this point, and consistently for 6 years, payday was Thursdays at the end of the night. This was one of the things Randy wanted to change and was also the thing that broke this camel's back. Like I said, I was a manager. I was the food prep manager. I would work from close to open prepping all the pies and veggies to be used for the next day. I worked between 5 and 7 days a week. If I didn't work, there was nothing to be used for the next day. So, needless to say, I didn't make a habit of calling off. Also, being that I did not come in until everyone else had left, my check was usually left for me in an envelope in the back room. Ultimately, the night that I decided I would quit, I had to call the owner's wife to remind her to leave my check because she had been becoming more forgetful lately. The response she gave me was not the usual, "Thank you for reminding me," but rather, "You're going to have to come in tomorrow night, Friday, not Thursday, and pick it up from me or Randy personally. It's going to be like that from now on." This would not usually be an issue as employers are allowed to change pay dates with proper notice to the employee. However, less than 20 hours is by no means proper notice. I needed my check to be available to me that night so I could cash it on my way home in the morning as I had bills to pay. I had attempted to plead with her to make the adjustment to payroll the following week. As I would have ample notice to be able to adjust my finances for one extra day, I was just unable to do so this week with such short notice. She told me that she and Randy had been discussing this, and most places pay on Fridays, and Friday was the busiest day for the restaurant, so it made no sense for paydays to be Fridays. Again, I pleaded, and again I was told no. Mind you, this was Thursday night, the next day was Friday, the busiest day of the week. As I was such a dependable, reliable employee, she never would check in on me, even if I would arrive late. I was also on salary, so my arrival and departure times didn't much matter as long as I got the job done. So I knew that if I didn't go in at all, it likely would not be noticed until the morning crew came in to open Friday morning, only to find the cooler and walk-in empty. Guess what? The found in the cooler and walk-in. Story 25. I was working at a small bar/hotel in some remote place. The manager was an absolute jackass, just rude to staff and the customers and unpleasant to be around. There was only a small handful of staff there expected to work all day, every day, myself included. We were casuals. I worked 9 long days in a row, finishing really late and getting up really early in the morning to come back and clean the hotel with not many hours in between. Pretty sure illegal in AUS. It also wasn't that close to my house, about a 40-minute drive each way. I had a day off after my long stint doing lots of shifts, which I was excited about, and planned a nice day out with my BF, but the manager rings me the day before to ask me to cover someone's shift who wanted it off. I said no, I had plans. He lost his crap and told me when I started I agreed to work weekends and I need to be available. Well, yeah, I worked every weekend since I started and I would have been available, but I wasn't rostered on originally. Decided I had enough of being treated like crap, and the money wasn't worth it to dread coming to work. I don't like confrontation and felt bad. My friend got me the job, so I wrote a letter quitting and planned to leave it on manager's desk and GTFO of there. Plan half failed because I got asked to stay back at work and panicked because manager was out. So it was perfect to leave the letter on his desk, but if I stayed back, he'd be back, and I wouldn't have the chance. Stayed back for a bit and then decided stuff it, I'm leaving, so said I forgot I had an appointment, dropped the letter and ran. I was casual, so didn't have to give notice. Manager has a big party booked in for the next day, and I was his only staff who could work on it. Not anymore. He rang me nonstop for 2 days and I ignored it. Best decision ever. Story 26. I had a job as a fairly niche field service engineer in it. Started off covering my local area, which was fine, maybe an hour traveling time to my most remote site, tops. Then they lost an engineer in my adjacent territory and I had to cover that too. Put my travel time up to about 2.5 hours each way. That wasn't great, but it was temporary, allegedly. Then they lost a further engineer. And guess what? I had to cover that area too. That meant I was having to do up to 4 hours driving each way just to get to a site, and then they expected me to put in up to a full 8-hour day. I mentioned this to my manager and pointed out that if I was pulling multi-day jobs at a site 4 hours away, it'd be far better to put me up in a hotel. But they said nah, as it was unusual for me to do multi-day installs. Anyway, a month or so later, I was expected to put in a complete new system at a site, spec it up 4 full days to do it. High-profile client, and I basically told my manager I needed a hotel. They pushed back, it's only 4 days, you'll be fine, just charge them the travel time as worked hours. Which is fine, but I was salaried, and they were the ones invoicing to the client, so no overtime for me. Anyway, on the second day, I arrived at nearly lunchtime after a massive accident on the motorway. Held me up for 4 hours and got a complete blocking off the client for it. I thought, duck this. Pack my tools, left the site with their old system ripped out and a pile of unopened boxes of new kit, switched off my mobile, and drove to head office. Parked close enough to the main entrance that the car operated the automatic doors. Went into reception and told the receptionist, very politely, it wasn't her fault, that I quit, all my gear was in the car, and here are my keys, phone, and pass. Then walked out and got a cab home. Found out from a friend that they lost that client, which was one of their main ones. Even after my manager basically spent the rest of the week installing the kit on his own, without any documentation as I'd written the spec and accidentally kept it. Story 27. I work primarily in locked mental health facilities for kids/teens. Part of this job is the simple fact that sometimes you are forced to go over on your hours. Not legally forced, but there are safety regulations about ratios of staff to patient. I understand this, and while it sucks, it's part of the job. Well, this facility, let's call it Newport News Behavioral Health Center, that's definitely just a name I made up and not the real name of the facility, was managed by people who had no idea what they were doing. We consistently ran out of supplies for the kids. They lived on site if they were on the urgent side. We didn't have proper equipment for staff and often worked at well over the ratio we were supposed to, which is dangerous for everyone. Also, favoritism was rampant. Some staff members could spend entire shifts just passing out free food to staff kids they liked while never doing their actual job. The same staff favorites never worked a minute past our 12-hour shift times. All in all, it was awful. Well, one day I'm on hour 16 of a 12-hour shift when the night manager gets on and tells me we have to take this kid to the emergency room. Keep in mind, this kid was with me for the last 16 hours and no one thought it was an emergency. Nothing had changed with his status. I tell them there's no way I can do that. The ER will be hours, and I have to come right back there at 7 a.m. to do this all over again. The manager said he would mandate me to stay. I walked out. They fired me. You think that's the end, but it isn't. I had kept meticulous records of every time I was harassed, mandated to stay for long shifts, while the favorites left early, and forced to spend my own money for supplies for the kids. We are talking about things like tampons, pads, do not crayon or something. I had dates, times, locations, and everything done there was on camera. I submitted it to HR and told them I wouldn't sue. I just wanted my job back. They reinstated me, but I haven't done yet. The crafty managers all like to stay in their offices and have meals with members of staff they liked, leaving the rest of the staff with the kids. They had planned this elaborate get-together for them during work hours. Well, what they didn't know is, not only was I well liked by the kids, but most staff liked working with me because I took my job seriously and was fair. I have been talking about unionizing as well. Instead, we decided to say, duck this. At first, we wanted to all walk out together, but decided against it because while we would love to stick it to them hard like that, we still loved the kids and didn't want to risk them being injured. So we did the next best thing. The most fed up of us quit that week, leaving shifts that needed coverage. Everyone who got a call to pick up a shift refused to do it for less than a $100 incentive bonus. Then another wave of quitting. Same thing now, except it's $200 incentive bonus time. The final wave came when all the managers had planned their lunch. We knew there would be managers to make sure the kids were okay, so we all walked out. There was around 150 people working there. This includes maintenance and office people, not just counselors. They had about 60 counselors, 15 or so full-time, 10 part-time, and the rest PRN. Out of those 60, 37 quit on the same month. 3 full-time stayed. We also reported the duck out of them to any agency that we could. Sadly, it doesn't have a badass ending, as last I heard, they were negligent in their care of a teenager and she died. Story 28. I really gave this store hell, and I'd feel sorry for my coworkers if they hadn't gotten really nice promotions soon after the fact. So I had just turned 19. I was living with my boyfriend, and we were in some financial trouble because the steel plant he worked at was idling. It was time for me to pull up my big girl pants and get my first job. See, I had an easy-ass childhood, and crippling emotional disorders were keeping me from making any progress as an adult until then. I get an interview at a Sally Beauty after a few weeks. For those who don't know, Sally's is a chain beauty supply store, selling mostly hair products. I ended up getting the job and thus followed the longest 4 months of my life. First of all, this woman never should have hired me. It's recommended that cosmetologists or students work there, and I knew essentially nothing about these products. I figured people wouldn't be constantly quizzing me. Wrong. I was all but useless in 60% of situations. I learned as best as I could, but there was only so much I could do. The main problem was my manager. She had never been a manager before. She left me alone on my first day of work, ever. She took 45-minute smoke breaks, went shopping in the middle of her workday, never clocked out, sat in the back her entire shift on her iPad. When we were frequently $100 short almost every night, I was blamed for it. Now, I'm not good at math, but I knew I wasn't ducking up that bad. We were short every night. A coworker and I frequently found the deposit bag under papers on the manager's desk and discovered at the end of 1 week that she had worked about 22 hours but changed it to her scheduled 40-something. I actually have a picture of that printout on my phone still. Additionally, our little store was only occupied in short bursts. Most of the time there was nothing to do but wait around. Freight came once a week and I was a boss at getting that crap done. It's one of the few useful skills I have. Since I had nothing at all to do for so long, I started bringing a book along with me. When someone seemed to be struggling, asking for help, or was coming to check out, I'd give them my full attention. Now, I know you're not really supposed to do this, but it was the only way to make 8-hour days bearable at that point, and I never ignored anyone. One night at about 8 p.m., store closed at 8:30, my boss calls and asks for me. I take the call in the back room and relish the moment to sit down for once. Then she starts screaming at me about how someone got a hold of her and said I was reading my book and how I need to stop, and she's not telling me again. Now, she had told me she didn't care what I did as long as no one complained, and no one had. I also quickly deduced that if a customer was getting a hold of her on Facebook, as she said, it wasn't because she was the manager, it was because they personally knew each other. I said few words, all of which were clipped as I tried not to scream back. Following that, I ended up crying in the bathroom for the next half hour. I finally decided to just quit. I came in the next morning for my shift only because she wouldn't be there, and my coworker would need help. I left my apron and name tag, sent my manager a text explaining why I quit immediately, and then emailed the company about all the illegal and irresponsible crap she was doing. A week or so later, she was asked to resign. One of my 2 coworkers became the new manager, and the other travels for the company, now to help with sales campaigns. I cry in the bathroom for half an hour and then get my manager fired. Story 29. Worked at a KFC. A kid had shat into his hands and flung it at the ceiling, where it promptly fell down and splattered on the floor, from what I'd gathered. Sometimes you have to do crafty, no pun intended, things in your job. I wish we had the staff to be able to do crafty things. We're supposed to have 4 people out front, 3 serving packing, 1 on the floor. They only had me because they wouldn't get anyone else in. I had to straight up tell people, yes, ma'am, I know there's crap on the floor in the toilet, but I can't clean it right now because there's 20 people in the queue and I have to pack orders. People in the middle of the queue started shouting, open another till, like I can just magic people from thin air. A woman waiting for her order is giving me the evilest ducking glare that I'm taking an order rather than packing hers. And I just duck and gave up. I had 2 hours left in my shift. It was only going to get busier, so I just left the front, grabbed my crap from the locker room, and walked out without saying a word. All I wanted was to get home, log on to WoW, crack open a beer, and wind down in what ended up being a near ice level of peace. So yeah, there was maybe 20 people waiting in line, including people who had paid for food and were waiting, crap on the ceiling and floor in the men's toilets, and nobody to serve customers. Quite the crap show. I regret leaving people there who had paid for food, but there's only so much you can handle, especially when it feels like you've got 20-odd people mad at you and no one to back you up. Story 30. I worked for a specialized automotive tool warehouse that was family-owned and had 2 facilities. The main location in the Northeast and a small warehouse covering the southeast. The owners were two brothers who could write the book on cheap a hole behavior. Pay was minimum wage, take it or leave it. Vacation time? 1 week, and good luck taking it. Do you have a suggestion? Not interested. Have a serious problem or concern? There's the door. The only benefit was all federally mandated breaks were given. A buzzer was installed and programmed to buzz when breaks started and finished. However, you had to pass through a metal detector to leave the building, since the only people who would work at a minimum sweatbox are thieves or addicts, actual owner quotes. So a miserable place full of people who were miserable, down on their luck and living paycheck to paycheck. Every Thursday, the owner would FedEx the paychecks for the SE branch so it would arrive on Friday afternoon. The FedEx guy usually arrived between 4 to 4:30, so it was down to the last minutes before we got paid. Kiwi FedEx arriving at 4:35 p.m. with no paychecks. The branch manager, who is kind an idiot, starts to berate the driver for losing the pack of checks. The driver tries to explain that he wasn't given any more packages and that maybe it was still at the dispatch. FedEx driver suggests that the manager calls the owner and gets the tracking number. Manager calls the owner on speakerphone so that the FedEx guy can hear the tracking number and look it up as the owner says it. It turns out that ops, the owner forgot to send them. Manager asks if owner is going to send them next day delivery. Owner says no. Manager asks if he will send it for Monday delivery. Owner says no. Manager asks if he will send them on Monday for Tuesday delivery, since several people rely on their checks to keep above water. Owner say no. He will send them on Thursday with the following checks. Owner says it's not his problem. The idiots who work there can't stop drinking and doping to pay the rent, then hangs up the phone. The manager apologizes to the FedEx guy, to us, and says things will be okay. He will talk to the owner again the following week and convince him to send them Tuesday. I left Friday, spent the weekend applying to other jobs, and did not go in Monday. When the manager called me and asked me to come in, I told him I do not work for free. I will come in once he calls and tells me paychecks have arrived. He understands and agrees. Well, he was unable to convince the owner to send the checks early, so Friday at 4:30 I got the call. I go in, walk into the manager's office, and he hands me my check. He says he is very sorry that this happened. I said, not your fault, no worries. He says it has been hell this past week. Not only did I not show up, but several other people would also come in and slack off if I'm not getting paid, why work? Or leave midway through the day. He says that he will be glad to see me back on Monday. I told him, sorry, but you only need to forget to pay me once. I was 18 in my second job, and I try to use everything as a learning experience. That job taught me the value of myself. Don't settle working for a holes. Even if you are an unskilled worker, that doesn't mean you are worthless. Story 31. I was working in a very specific high-tech field for a Fortune 500 company for 12 years. It was a super stressful job using highly specific computer software to get custom, very expensive products out the door of our plant. I was really good at what I did, worked like crazy, 10, 12-hour days, 7 days a week sometimes, to keep up with on-time delivery to the customer. This was salaried, no overtime pay. I trained people. I was the go-to person if people couldn't figure things out. Unfortunately, a lot of management there was old school. They wanted things to be like they were in the 1950s. It was more important to my boss that he keep track of what time I showed up for work and what time I left, rather than how well I did my job. The administrative assistant hoarded office supplies, and you could not get a pen or a roll of scotch tape without begging her for them. There were also a lot of backstabbing, useless people there who continued to keep employed simply by making other people look bad. Since I was sitting at a desk job for 10 to 12 hours a day, I took 2 casual breaks per day and a 30-minute lunch. There were no assigned breaks, and since I was working no less than 10 hours a day, even with a few breaks in there, I still had plenty more than 40 hours a week. I would use my breaks to walk around the plant, to keep my body moving and get some exercise. Cue backstabbers. My boss sits me down one day, absolutely furious. Keep in mind, he knew I was the only employee of his working 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. He told me that someone had told him I was spending 4 to 5 hours a day just wandering the plant, effectively stealing from the company. I was no longer allowed to leave my desk. I was given 2 10-minute bathroom breaks a day and a lunch. These rules did not apply to anyone else in the company. I was upset that he took the word over someone else over knowing me and how I worked. I told him he should have told this person, I'm her supervisor, and I am completely knowledgeable about the hours she works and the time she takes breaks. He was more concerned about treating me like a 5-year-old than the fact I was one of the best at what I did at that company. I tried to do what he told me to do for a few weeks. Sit at a desk without moving for 12 hours a day. My back went out, both hips and knees and ankles. I ended up in this hospital and missed a week of work. When I got back, my boss told me if I ever missed another day because of my back, I would have to file disability, so he would only have to pay me 60% pay for a day I missed because of my back. That was Monday. I had a new job by Wednesday. I walked into his office, handed him my typed letter of resignation, and told him, Friday will be my last day. The look on his face was priceless. In my industry, notice is usually a month, not a few days. 2 years later, former coworkers still texted me, emailed me, and called me, telling me they missed me and things are not the same there without me. Because I was the one who knew everything and knew how to rally the team, Story 32 got offered a kitchen job by a friend of mine who was going to be head chef at a new place that was opening. Started there and it was a pretty cool job. Until about a month later when the owner yelled at my head chef friend in front of a dining room full of guests. So my friend put in his notice right on the spot and finished his 2 weeks where he was replaced by a new chef. New chef was nothing short of a Nazi, always berating employees, nothing was ever good enough. And he especially had a hard-on for me and was constantly giving me crap over anything he could think of. I found out that my chef friend got a spot at a big theme restaurant. Guitars on the wall, hint, hint, that opened recently. So I requested half a day off for a doctor's appointment. Went there and got hired on the spot, then called the restaurant and told the hostess to tell idiot chef that I wasn't coming in for the rest of the shift, and every shift after that since I was quitting. But here's where it gets good. I went back over a week later to get my last paycheck, and idiot chef basically cornered me, told me what I did was unprofessional, and since he heard about where I was now, he was going to call my supervisor and tell him how unprofessional I am. Then he asked me the name of my supervisor, to which this brought a crap-eating grin to my face as I enthusiastically told him the name of my supervisor, who just so happened to be my chef friend, who just quit and who this Nazi a hole just replaced. I swear it was like watching a big balloon that rapidly deflated. He just had dumbfounded look on his face as he muttered out, "Oh, well, tell him I said hi." The best part was that his assistant chef was nearby, who really wasn't fond of him either, and he was trying to keep from busting out laughing. Walked out of there feeling like a boss. Bonus, about a month after I left, a whole chef made the mistake of pissing off a dishwasher because he forgot to clock for his shift. And even though a whole chef knew damn well he was there the whole time, he refused to make the adjustment and told him, "Tough crap, you learned a lesson," meaning he just worked his full shift for nothing. Now, this dishwasher was a big black dude who was built like a Steelers linebacker. So he grabbed a whole chef in a bear hug and started slamming him against the wall as hard as he could. My ex-girlfriend was working the host stand and told me she kept hearing this dull thumping sound coming from the back of the restaurant. Then one of the kitchen workers came running up. A whole chef screamed to him to go get help, and he was laughing so hard that he couldn't tell them what was happening right away and had to catch his breath first. The place then folded about less than a month later. Story 33. I was a driver, medical transportation, and they told me I had to work 12 hours for 8 hours pay. I said, "Guess what? Looks like you are working 12 hours because I'm out this mother ducker." He was like, "Haha, okay." When I left, he was still like, "Did he really quit?" Story 34. This isn't a great story, but it is the only time I've quit a job on the spot. The backstory is I had been working as a security guard for about a year. 8 months of that was with a big organization, and I scored a pretty sweet control room gig where I got to sit in an office and watch CCTV monitors. Secure hours, lots of night shift penalty rates, all in all the kind of job you want because the money and conditions are better than 90% of other jobs. I'd booked an interstate trip for a convention I wanted to go to and took leave for it months in advance, only to have my leave canceled last minute because of a terror alert. Even though it only affected police and emergency services, our company decided that counted them as well because they perceived an increase in demand for guards and wanted to ensure they didn't have their relief guards covering people on leave. I complained and eventually managed to get my leave reinstated. Also, I would have lost out on my non-refundable flights and hotel deposit. But when I came back from leaving, I was informed that my control room gig was gone and I would be reassigned. I sat at home for 2 weeks on my usual pay-playing video games until I got informed I had a new site lined up. It was at a large office building occupied by a major telco provider. I was excited because I had heard that the control room gig at that site was really chill and part of the job was to watch cable TV. Because sometimes techs would call in the middle of the night to ask for you to report on the signal quality. I have no idea if that was true or not. It was just something people I worked with had told me. Anyway, I get there for my shift at 9 a.m. and I don't have a control room role anymore. I'm working the concierge desk. I'll spend all day handing out passes and keys and whatnot. It's high visibility and corporate, so dress code is at a high standard and I have to stand all day. Also, it's a lower hourly rate with no night penalties, so I'm getting paid significantly less. Anyway, an hour or two into my shift, I realized that if this is my new job, I don't want to do security anymore. And also, my 1-year security license has expired the day before. Legally, I can't be working without it. I told the shift supervisor this, and he tells me to immediately go submit the paperwork and get an interim license until my renewal comes through. Unfortunately, because of the aforementioned terror alerts, the requirements to be a guard have changed, and I now need to have a more comprehensive police background check and let them take my fingerprints so they have them on file. I have nothing to hide, but that seems like a huge hassle and I don't want to do it. I tell my new boss this. Well, you have to. Yeah, I'm not going to. You can't work without a license. I'm okay with that. I walk off site, go home, return my uniforms, and get a new job at Kinko's a week later on better money. So the Crapshow I left behind, they were without a concierge for like a day. Woo, story 35. I was working at a job in customer service for an aftermarket automotive company that had become grueling. One of my coworkers was a nightmare, and management was afraid to fire him. He was verbally abusive to myself, along with the rest of the staff, including the boss, and was hard to work with. Him and I had it out all the time because I was a female and knew more than him. He found this threatening. He didn't like that I was the go-to gal for everything. The salesman, big clients, technical advice. I loved knowing this, as it made him mad. It doesn't excuse his abusive behavior, but his lashing out was his crappy way of dealing with it. I had complained multiple times to HR and my boss about his erratic, abusive behavior. They would address it, he would behave, and then within 2 weeks, he was back at it again. Well, it got old. I was also planning on moving out west in a few months and was going to quit my job. I couldn't tell anyone about this because I needed all my paychecks. I wasn't paid a lot, so I told the staff that I was taking over my grandpa's house, who had recently passed. I took a week off to pack up my crap and sent on it to my grandpa's house, on the other side of town. The moving truck was coming at the end of the month to drive my stuff 2,000 miles away, where I had a place to stay with a few job prospects lined up. I was done after yet another blowout at the job with angry coworker. I walked into work after my week off, and my boss asked how my grandpa's house was coming along. In front of the entire 5 people that I worked with, including my angry coworker, I said, "It's fine, I'm moving out west. Friday's my last day." My boss's face went gray and the room went dead silent. No one knew what to say next. My boss pulled me in the conference room and started yelling at me that I embarrassed her in front of the staff. I told her that I was done with her crazy self and to get a grip. She told me that today was my last day. I said, "No, it's not. I'm here until the end of the week for my pay." I went back to my desk and sat down for about 30 minutes. Boss came back with a week's pay and told me to go home. She cried and tried to apologize, but I told her it was too late. I cashed the check on the ride home 10 minutes later. Story 36. Back in 2007, I just started working for an independently owned Sprint store. And after about a week and a half, I realized it was bullcrap. The owner, Omar, made dirty remarks to me almost daily, and there was zero organization or professionalism in the store. I was a repair tech and was regularly assigned tasks that were not in my job description, like tearing up the old floors so he could renovate, cleaning the bathroom, and running out to get his lunch. I was on salary and only had 1 day off per week, and my schedule was 8 a.m., 8 p.m., and despite being on salary, my pay was deducted for any time I missed. I was made aware of precisely none of this until after I'd started, which should have been red flag number 1, but back then I was young and I was just really excited to turn my hobby, phone tinkering, into a job. Omar would sit in the back stuffing his face while watching Jordanian soap operas all day, while I ran the store by myself, and he'd take off at random times, leaving me alone in the store with no keys and no indication of when he'd be back. He hired a guy to be his friend too. No bullcrap. He and this new guy would just hang out in the store all day, talking, smoking, or running off to sporting events while I held down the fort. I never saw the new guy do any actual work. Anyway, one day Omar had a date with a customer. Not even kidding. He hit on a female customer during a transaction and she actually agreed to go out with him and told me he'd be back in a couple hours. This was around 5, and we closed at 8, so I figured he'd be back by closing time since I once again was alone in the store with no keys, plus I had not yet been trained in closing duties, and I had an event to attend after work that I'd already informed him of. Surely, he'd be mindful of all this and return in time, right? Not only did I get slammed right after he left, I had a line of customers who were angry because I literally could not sell them a phone since I had no way of opening the stock cabinet. Omar had a policy that he was the only one allowed to unlock it. And like I said, he didn't leave me any keys, nor could I process transactions BC. The registers were down. 8 o'clock was quickly creeping up with no sign of Omar, and he wasn't answering his phone. I had no idea what to do, and I felt so helpless and frustrated that I was nearly in tears. I finally called the only other employee with keys, Jessica, around 7:45 and begged her to come help me. She rushed right over, bless her, and helped me close down the store. As we were leaving, I asked her to tell Omar that he was and I was never coming back. I was duck and done. I didn't leave much of a crap show behind, but this happened on a Friday night and I was usually scheduled for Saturdays, which meant Omar would have to get off his fat ass and come in to run the store in my place. Story 37, Restaurant Duty Manager. Ducks with me in an attempt to make me homeless. I quit before a busy shift, which leads to a series of events where two of their office workers got their faces introduced to food and furniture. I worked in a restaurant years ago and was couch surfing, on the verge of being homeless because I wouldn't sleep with the chick I was staying with. Before I went to work, she told me if I wasn't home by X time, she'd lock me out right after she took my key off me. I got to work and informed the manager I needed to leave on time as early as possible. I had been there over a year, never took a day off, and always picked up extra shifts. I found out later he was openly telling my coworkers about my situation because he's an idiot. He deliberately sent everyone else in the restaurant home one by one and left me unnecessarily polishing cutlery while he sat in the office on his phone. He'd stayed in the office during a busy as duck dinner service as well. The next day was Mother's Day, and they were fully booked for both lunch and dinner. I was rostered for both. Eventually, I went to the office and told him I urgently need to leave. He made it obvious he was ducking with me on purpose, so I told him to go duck himself and I bailed. They already knew I was leaving soon as I was moving interstate, refused to accept that I'd quit because they wanted to fire me. They dragged me out for a meeting to do exactly that, but wouldn't give me my final pay, separation certificate, pay slips, etc. So I ended up going out there the day I left to move with a friend. Said friend introduced a large leather couch cushion to the office worker's face when she refused to provide said documents and pay. They had another office worker hanging around, knowing I was coming. He came out to involve himself and copped an apple to the face at a great rate of knots. We left. They called the cops. Cop shop was opposite the restaurant, and the cops followed us, didn't attempt to pull us over, down the highway. We did our U-turn, bailed in the other direction to another train station. I got on the train and headed off interstate. Just to be an a-hole, I lodged a complaint with Fair Work because they still wouldn't pay me a few $100s. And somehow not only got more than I was owed, but they also provided a written reference for me to use. Turns out, about 6 months later, when I had to go to the cop shop, still interstate, the officer asked if I had any warrants, etc. I explained what happened. He went out the back to check for warrants, etc., and came back laughing his ass off because he didn't believe it. I asked if he was going to arrest me, and he said no. This was 8 years ago, and I've heard nothing since. So I assume I'm in the clear. Story 38. I worked at this hotel that was going downhill quickly. Management was saying that they only had 2 years leasing the building and didn't know if they would keep the business. As such, they would invest nothing in it, and were just waiting for the 2 years to be up, while the staff had to deal with rampant levels of unhappy customers, yelling and complaining at every moment. Obviously, no one would ever take this pressure for 2 years. Managers would quit within weeks, as they would always be at the end of the stick, having to deal with customers and unhappy staff. The rest of the stall was quitting way faster so that we could attract fools to enlist this war site. One day I found myself as the only one capable to manage availabilities and control all the payment systems of the hotel. I was under immense stress and my workload was huge as the rest of my staff wasn't enough to allow me proper days offs or keep stuff organized. The last drop happened when the manager took her motherhood leave and maintenance staff quit with no substitute. I had 25 due days of holidays and over 20 extra unpaid work days. I looked around me watching the entire hotel collapse and predicting utter chaos in the next few hours and even more anarchy the following days. I thought to myself, why on earth would I want to lose my time with a company that doesn't care for its own business? I called the regional manager and told him he had 2 hours to get someone here, or I would leave the place with no one at the front desk. The guy started to yell at me, accusing me of doing nothing for the company. When I mentioned that I was the last one standing from the previous team and I was due over 40 off days, and that accusing me of such things was insanity, he threatened me legally if I was to leave. I answered, call your lawyer then and bye. He never knew that I wouldn't leave the hotel with no one here, but he rushed to the place under 1 hour. When I saw him sweating like a river entering the front door, I left and wished him good luck. For the next 2 weeks, I was harassed by them because no one knew how to manage availabilities on all those stupid extranets. No one knew how to invoice, how to get and process payments. I was told that everyone quit the following days and the business had to shut down before their lease was up. This comes to show that sometimes even a mere underpaid employee can hold a lot of power. I don't regret a thing, and I still feel sorry for all those customers that would pay for their stay and see themselves be conned by people without a once of pride in their area of work. I now work with another hotel chain, and every time I listen to people complain about our job, I start to tell them stories of my previous nightmare. They quickly develop a different perspective of things. Story 39, always worked the close shift at a fast food joint. My managers loved to hand out citations for any little thing. The policy was 3 strikes and you're out. I had 2 strikes left and was told to clean up the entire front end and bathroom in an hour or risk getting a 3rd strike. To put things in perspective, I had to close the register, count the money, clean up the front end, restock everything, sweep and mop the floors, and clean the entire bathroom, including the toilets, for basically $8 or $5. I walked into the bathroom just to see what to expect. Looked like someone had finished projectile crafting all over the toilet and then decided to piss next to the sink. I knew I wouldn't be able to do everything in an hour and that I would get fired regardless. So I took my uniform off and walked home shirtless. Story 40. I worked at an insurance company for about 4 years as a customer service representative for health and dental claim. I transferred departments to the disability department because I was bilingual, and they desperately needed a bilingual representative to deal with the French claimants. However, the job also requires complicated payout calculations for people who received government disability, as it is an offset to their disability payment. I told them from the outset that I could learn to do calculations, but that I would need extra time and training to do so, as it is not my forte. And since they so desperately needed my French skills, they agreed. Well, the people on my team responsible for training me only gave me a couple of training sessions and expected me to be able to do all of the many different types of calculations perfectly after that. So I was handling all of the French claimants for my team and English claimants, plus helping out with French claimants for another larger team, and expected to do these complicated calculations. For months, I asked for help from my colleagues and my boss and got no help. I asked them to either drop the calculations and give them to another colleague, since I did all of the French claims for the team, which equaled an extra person's work for the day, plus all of my regular English claimant. They didn't agree to this, saying that I should be able to do it all. Eventually, they did an audit of the process and decided that every representative needed to clear all of their pending calculations in 2 weeks, all within a normal workday. I had 8 pending calculations plus all of my regular work with French and English claimants to do, and I didn't even know how to do the actual calculations because they were all outliers. I called my boss and quit on the spot, telling her that from now until my last day, I wouldn't be doing any calculations. I told her I would work on my normal French and English claimants, but that I would not do a single calculation. She told me she didn't think I could do that, so I told her I just did, and if she was mad, she could fire me instead, and I'd collect IE for the first time in my life. Go duck yourselves. I asked for help repeatedly while doing all of my regular work, plus more, to help out your other team with French claimants. And you can't help me? The boss ended up doing what I suggested, which is giving all of the calcs to the team member who was specialized in calcs and taking her off of doing regular claims for 2 weeks, while the other team members did all of the calc specialist claims. This is what teamwork means. Each person does the job best suited to their strengths. From what I gather, the boss is still looking for a French-speaking representative to do the work I did. She has had to outsource all of it to the Montreal office since I left. Go duck yourself, Industrial Alliance. Story 41. Less in the heat of the moment, more like exactly the right people to leave. My fiancé and I worked at the same place, a corporate chain franchised by his aunt. I've made a few posts about this evil hag before, but for this post, we'll focus on how much she took advantage of us. My fiancé was the regional manager for the area. He was also tech installation and support, hiring manager, inventory manager for all 8 locations, and a sales rep. He was required to make and know every password to every account and bit of software. He was the only one who knew how to operate the cameras. He fixed every piece of tech that broke, saving our boss thousands of dollars. Even after he got demoted for not doing something very illegal, the only thing that changed was his pay rate. Because he had so much to do, and our boss refused to let him train anyone else to help him, I would use his code to manage inventory, since I was often working at the hub location. I quit about a month before he did, which means the company lost their inventory manager. My fiancé started standing up for himself and refused to do inventory since his title was sales rep. I tried to convince him to only do the work of a sales rep, but he didn't want to screw over his coworkers, so he still helped with everything else. Their inventory went to crap. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of devices were missing, at the wrong location, still at the warehouse, not scanned in the tracking program, or legitimately missing. When he quit, the company was in some real trouble. Since he was the only one who knew the passwords for most of the software, the passwords left with him. He was the only one who knew how to fix the garbage computers, so each storefront was down a register after a couple weeks. The cameras were basically for show, since no one else knew how to operate them. Since there was no longer a buffer between female Satan and the employees, the already high turnover rate tripled. Printer nozzles clogged. Printer tossed out and bought a new one. Employee gets sick and has a doctor's note. Employee is fired and each location has one sales rep. Half the locations don't have managers. We honestly don't know how the stores are still functioning. When he left without a notice, he made it very clear that he would do absolutely nothing to help out anyone. That was over 7 months ago, and he still has people calling to ask for help with something. Once he started sharing the crap that went down there, our boss was essentially disowned by the rest of the family. The friends we made while working there have all been left and are in better places. All in all, a win for us and a big L for the woman who made our lives hell for a year. Story 42. I worked as a porter at a pretty busy bakery once. The owner must have been at least 500 pounds, and being that this was a family business, his wife ran to the front of the shop. It wasn't long before she started making passes at me and grabbing me. Either way, this was very unwelcome attention, and eventually I got fed up and quit. I specifically chose a holiday, Valentine's Day, because I knew that they would be swamped. I was tasked with cleaning everything up at the end of the day and preparing everything for the next day. Needless to say, I left everything the way it was, did not prep a single thing, and dumped a bunch of flour on the floor and spelled out "I quit" in the flour. I had a lot of angry voicemails the next day, but I never regretted doing what I did. Story 43. I worked at Walgreens and was hired in as a photo tech. Well before being hired, I had to redo their internal test application 4 times because they kept screwing them up. After I was hired, they forgot to pay me my first 2 months and fired the guy that was supposed to train me my second day, which left me in charge of all of the photo tech department. So I learned how to run every machine, built a workflow pipeline that other stores ended up adopting, and also attended community college. My first vacation, which I told them about before being hired, was in July and between the 2nd and 7th. I was flying from Michigan to Texas for an event for my senior trip as I had just graduated high school. Well, while I was there, they called me and asked where I was. I told them. They said that I had a schedule, and I asked what they wanted me to do about it. They threatened to fire me, and I said K, but they didn't. I came back and had 2 of my allotted 3 write-ups waiting, which put me on probation. Shortly thereafter, a good friend of mine died, and I was going to go to his funeral, but my boss wouldn't let me go, so I threatened to sue. She let me go, and that seemed to be the end of that until they decided to start scheduling me while I was at school, demanding that I come into work. It was during this time I got a septic infection and nearly died. Failed all my college classes. I'm trying to balance work and school and health. I was still the only one who could run the machines in the photo lab, and I turned them all off, removed every film canister, picture paper, and took my notes on how to run the machines with me. The best part was my boss running up to me at the door and screaming, "If you walk out that door, you're fired." I remember saying, "Yeah, that's the plan." All of this happened within about 6 months. I have now worked at a bank and influenced bank policy, had some of the highest customer satisfaction rating in the company, been given special practice, and before I left that position to attend my university full-time, was promoted 3 times in 2 years. I am now attending a school to be a CG artist and rigger, and have a 3.74 GPA duck Walmart, Walgreens, and anything from that branch of cuckery. As a song once said, duck you with a ducking anchor. Story 44. Worked at a small coffee shop that had recently been reopened by a woman whose dream was to own a coffee shop. Ever seen Kitchen Nightmares? Now imagine one of those places selling coffee instead of food. She was an idiot, knew nothing about business or coffee, and she was cheap to boot. She drove away almost all of the old customers from the previous idiot owners, and our new regular clientele was comprised mostly of street people and a few normal people who liked the way I made coffee, although probably not me. I was definitely an a-hole barista at the time, which I know didn't help, but in reality my attitude wasn't nearly our biggest problem. I did manage to build a regular group of customers that would actually spend money. I did try really hard to do a good job. I researched how to make the best coffee and espresso, I took the time, and did the math to figure out pricing for everything that would drive away the people coming in and camping on a $1 cup of coffee. I told my BF at the time that our slogan was, "Where every hour is homeless happy hour," but encourage people who would actually spend money to come in while allowing her to make a profit. I learned to use the coffee roaster and was actually pretty decent at roasting after a while. Every suggestion and complaint from myself and the customers was ignored, but I caught the blame for every aspect of her failing business because I was the only employee. One day, I'd had enough and told her I needed to talk to her. We went out the back door and I unleashed. I told her what a ducking idiot she was, what a crafty business owner and just a Karen in general, and that I was the only thing keeping the business open at that point. I ended by telling her, whoever gave you a business loan should be fired, because they're an even bigger git than you are. By chance, this was one of the few days we actually had a number of customers in at once, and the back door had been open the entire time, so they very clearly heard my tirade. I walked out through the shop, told my regulars sorry, and left. She closed less than 2 months after that. I'm still a little embarrassed at losing control like I did, but it's still really ducking satisfying to know that I was right. Duck you, Shauna. I hope you're still paying that crap off. Story 45. I was taken on at a firm that makes some proprietary hardware. They wanted a cut-down mobile version of their hardware in the form of an app, so they hired me. Now, this was my first programming job, and I was hired with the job title of junior developer. For some added context, I had been looking for a job in programming for a long time, upwards of a year, And since I didn't have a degree or industrial experience, nobody would look my way. The interview I went for at this place wasn't even for this job, it was in its support. But they saw I had programming experience from my own projects on my CV and offered me the junior dev job instead, on the basis of a minimum wage trial where I would see a pay rise at the end of that trial. Initially, they had me familiarizing myself with the platform we would be using, and after a week I presented them with a few little things I had made and they seemed happy. So they gave me my first bits of work relating to the actual requirements, and straight away it was far too much for someone on their first programming job to do quickly, but I still made progress. They then dropped the junior from my job title and gave me full responsibility on the app. That was my first real, I should probably leave this place moment. When the trial came to an end, they said they were happy with my progress. However, they are only increasing my pay from one minimum wage to the other one. In the UK, we have a 21 to 24 bracket and a 24 plus bracket for minimum wages of £7.78 and £8.21. Safe to say I wasn't happy, so I called in sick the day after and spent the day preparing a fresh new CV with this experience. When I called in sick, they said, "It is clearly due to our meeting yesterday. You aren't happy, are you?" So I told them I wasn't, and that I need some time to reassess what I want. They told me I had better be in the next day, otherwise that was the end. I called them back later that day and told them I wasn't coming back, 6 months before they had told their partners this app was due to launch. A few days later, I had an interview lined up working with similar technology and got offered the job on the spot with a hefty pay rise. Story 46, Liquorland. After being lied to, screwed out of a healthy redundancy package that I was entitled to, and had a bevy of false accusations placed against me so they could fire me, none of them stuck because they were made up. I quit in my own special way. I first waited until my store manager, area manager, and state manager were all on annual leave, and I'd be running the shop. I then got a doctor's note giving me 3 weeks off work for strained back muscle. That afternoon on Friday, the busiest trading day of the week, half an hour after taking over, I wrote my resignation email. One went to the CEO, upper management, and board members, detailing how I'd been screwed over by my managers for the previous 18 months, threatening legal action and going to the press if my leave payouts were withheld. The second was to my area manager's email, who was uncontactable on leave, stating my 2 weeks' notice to resign and attaching a copy of my doctor's certificate that said I was unable to work. Then I shut and locked the doors, threw the keys in the safe, and went home. I turned my phone off, drank 2 bottles of wine, and played the duck out of some Final Fantasy. On the following Monday, I checked my bank account to find all my annual leave paid out and my 2 weeks of notice paid out as sick leave. Still, duck you Liquorland. I refused to buy at any West Farmers owned store thanks to the way I was treated. Story 47. I get to tell my story. Here goes. I taught at a small private school for 7 years. In that time that I worked there, I taught all art classes for all grades K-12 and even did other tasks for the school, such as help students with college prep, sub for other classes, and wrote all of the content and curriculum for the art program. I was the only art teacher there. I put so much work, time, energy, and love into my job, and I truly loved being there. The only thing was, the man who founded the school didn't have any background in education or child studies whatsoever, and what's worse, he couldn't manage money. Paychecks bounced, arrived late, and our direct deposit disappeared last summer. If he didn't blame the accountant for these errors, he blamed us for our lack of morale. If any of us needed supplies, we always had to buy them on our own with a promise that he would reimburse us, provided that we turned in an expense report. Even when we did, it could take up to 6 months before we'd see our money back. The final straw was when my salaried paycheck, which was already 5 days late, didn't arrive. 5 of my coworkers and I were called into a meeting in his office. During this meeting, he informed us that we weren't getting paid and he didn't know when he would be able to pay us. The month was only a week away from ending, and we had not received one paycheck for it. We were livid. His excuses? He was kicked out of his family trust over the holiday weekend, so that's why he had no money. When 2 of my coworkers asked if he would take out a loan to cover our checks, he said no. He also told us just to wait until his business deal clears with some person and deal that we had never heard of, and with total lack of detail and transparency. With no guarantee of a payday or pay in general, his actions of blaming everyone but himself for the situation, and after years of putting up with excuses, blame, lies, and bullcrap, I took my toys and went home. I didn't show up the following day and I filed for unemployment right away, which I won. Sadly, I was the only one at the time who could see the writing on the wall. My supervisor left 2 weeks later. Story 48. I didn't exactly quit in the heat of the moment, as I did give my 2 weeks. However, my decision to quit was made quite hastily. I saw my best friend get fired, and I knew the owner was going after another one of the employees who had been with him 10 plus years. I realized that loyalty meant nothing to this guy, and I didn't want to waste my time at a company where I wasn't appreciated anyway. I fought hard for raises that were well-deserved, while others who did no work were given them freely. I was berated via email and in person on a daily basis. I gave my 2 weeks notice, and I did my job, but I did not train anyone how to do what I did, which would have been impossible to do in 2 weeks. I also worked remotely my last 2 weeks. I had the owner by the balls, and he knew it. He begged me to stay, offered me more time working remotely, more money, etc. I refused. One of my last days with the company, he sent a group text to my personal cell phone and included other managers at the office saying they could text me anytime if they had questions. I responded that what he did was inappropriate and that it was my personal phone and no one should be texting me on it, nor should he have shared the number. I also told him that my last day was coming up and I would not be responding to any questions for any help with anything, as I would no longer be a paid employee of the company. My last day came and went without a problem, and I never received another text from any of the managers. He did text me when someone wrote a negative Glassdoor review saying they were me, my position, the length of time I had been with the company, that particular location, asking me how I could do something like that. I just let him know I didn't do it, and could he please stop texting about his company that I no longer worked for. I know that for a while there, he had no one to handle events, purchasing, maintenance, and a whole list of other things. I contemplated writing a negative Glassdoor review about the place, but decided against it. It would be unprofessional and a waste of time. Besides, 28 other employees already wrote negative reviews. What's another one? Story 49. I worked for a Pier 1 in the late 90s as a teen, had a terribad boss take over after our manager got pregnant and went on leave and didn't come back. Everything changed and a lot of the employees left before me. I worked mainly in the back room, and my main job consisted of unloading trucks that came on the weekdays and bringing out inventory. Glamorous, I know. Things got bad when I was the only person unloading trucks at the beginning of summer. None of the front-end employees were allowed to help when he was there. Thursdays, trucks stayed overnight and were there till Friday night, and only just over half finished by the time my shift ended. And the back room was still filled to where walking space was just a small single step at a timeline, and shelf climbing was required. I was told that I couldn't stay for overtime to finish the job before the weekend was up, and someone else would have to finish while I was off. There was another truck coming on Monday morning. I come back on Monday, to the truck gone, but everything in the truck was either outside against the wall and back entrance or filling the entire back room, so the only place to walk was a line to the boss's office and the bathroom. Nothing was in order, and everything was just laying in a spot. Turns out that no one unloaded the truck, so the driver themselves just tossed it out when they had to pick up the trailer. I tried to get everything I could in its place, but really just got fed up after a couple hours, told my coworkers up front I was done, and walked out. Left a note on his desk that I would be back to pick up my check, and I quit. I knew he was going to be the only one in to unload what was on our outside wall and the truck. When I went in to get my check, he gloated that I was terminated because I didn't give my 2 weeks. I thanked him for my unemployment check before walking out. Made sure to get unemployment on principle before job hunting again a couple months later.